This is Thames Television. At 10:30 tonight, Thames News. But now it's 10 o'clock and we go over to Alastair Stewart and John Suchet at the studios of ITN.
BR blamed for train door deaths. It could cost them millions. Thai protesters win reforms and freedom for their leader. Africa's drought and famine spread south, threatening millions. Saudi king pays out for little Laura's transplant. And convicted killer pleads for his life on US chat show. Good evening. The doors on some British Rail high-speed trains are unsafe, according to a report by the Health and Safety Executive. Poor maintenance is partly to blame. 324 passengers have died in falls from trains in the last 20 years. Many of their deaths were unexplained. The report comes as a TV documentary, to be shown tomorrow, alleges that BR withheld evidence on faulty doors from engineers investigating the problem. British Rail deny the allegations, but they say new door locks are to be fitted to all high-speed trains.
People have been falling from trains at an alarming rate. It's the single biggest danger rail users face. Last year alone, 24 people died, almost one a fortnight. British Rail has persistently denied the locks on its doors are to blame. Now, tests by health and safety workers show the doors can fly open under only very slight pressure. 1 in 70 doors examined was found to be risky. The health and safety executive concluded BR hadn't exercised a sufficient standard of care.
People had said that mechanical failure was not a cause. Now nobody has any excuse for saying that.
The problem centres on locks like this. The bolt should extend this far, but it can jam halfway, and under the slightest pressure it can burst open. Attempting to preempt criticism, BR this morning unveiled its solution, a new bolt which will snap into place automatically once the train is moving at more than 9 miles an hour. It would take 4 years to fit in every train, and trials won't start till July.
Guilt doesn't enter into it. Anybody who gets killed on my trains is my personal responsibility, and therefore I've got to put it right. That's what I'm trying to do today, and that's what I'm trying to show you.
But allegations of a cover-up are now emerging. A BR commissioned report last year cleared the door locks of any blame. In a TV documentary tomorrow, that report's author says BR didn't give him vital evidence, and that made his findings invalid.
Well, it is wrong, yes. But, so I'd find it difficult to understand why we weren't given that evidence.
For the bereaved, today's report has been a welcome first step. When Jane Gibbons' brother fell from a train, the police tried to convince her it was suicide.
Because I knew there was a foul, because I knew my brother wasn't suicidal, and I suppose all the other people that went out weren't suicidal. So it puts families' minds at rest that their loved ones didn't commit suicide.
British Rail says it has no plans to compensate any relatives as their liability hasn't been proved. Lawyers acting for the families say they're now considering legal action.
The Thai Prime Minister, General Suchet, went down on his knees before King Bhumipol tonight and promised he would now support democracy and free thousands of people arrested since Sunday. The opposition leader, Chamlong Simlung, is already free and also saw the king. Mr. Chamlong and General Suchet both appealed for calm. Students and others demonstrating against General Suchet's military rule had again defied a curfew in the Thai capital, Bangkok. At least 40, possibly many more, have been killed by troops.
Thousands of students were gathered at the university tonight when the news came through that their leader was to be released from jail and to be invited to negotiate with the Prime Minister. Along with the rest of the nation, student leaders heard the dramatic news in a television broadcast. The hated Prime Minister of Thailand was seen summoned on his knees before the king, along with Simlung Chamlong, the jailed opposition leader. The king told the men before him he wanted them to meet for face-to-face negotiations. Prime Minister Suchet then announced that he had agreed to release Chamlong from prison, and the pro-democracy leader appealed for calm among his supporters. The developments came after a day in which troops loyal to the government attempted to stamp their authority on the streets. but rumours abounded that rebel forces were heading for the capital to back the students. And there were fears that a confrontation between the two would lead to a bloodbath in the city. Buoyed up by the belief that help was on its way, protesters mocked the troops for their cowardice, and some almost dared lines of armed soldiers to shoot them. As night fell, they attacked any government building in sight, challenging the soldiers for possession of the streets. When the troops eventually responded, even the youngest were left to fend for themselves. Within moments, the area had been cleared and was back in military hands. Ironically, just hours before the TV announcement was made, more young men were being arrested. But the Prime Minister has now offered an amnesty to all of those jailed during the protests. In the last hour, protest leaders have been meeting at the university to discuss the implications of the government's concessions. Tonight, the students have scored a major victory, but the curfew is still in force here and the atmosphere is extremely tense. The fight for a democratically elected Prime Minister appears to be still on. Caroline Kerr, News at 10, Bangkok.
The hungry people of Mozambique are existing on a diet of grass and roots because of the worst drought in southern Africa this century. ITN has discovered new evidence that the drought is now threatening millions of people across the region. Aid agencies believe 30 million may fall victim to malnutrition, disease and starvation by the end of this summer. The world has become used to famine in Africa's northern states of Somalia, Ethiopia and the Sudan. Now the blight has spread south. In 11 countries from the southwest coast to the Indian Ocean, the seasonal rains have failed. Crop levels are down by 60% and more. Some areas have only weeks of water supplies left. In 3 special reports for News at 10, Trevor McDonald looks at some of the worst affected countries, reporting tomorrow from South Africa and on Friday from Zimbabwe. Tonight he joins us from Mozambique in the first ever live television transmission from that country.
Good evening from Mozambique, a country fighting for survival, and it's been a long, excruciating struggle. Since 1976, 1 million people have been killed in a civil war which has all but devastated this country. More than 3 million people have been displaced. Another million are in an area controlled by anti-government guerrillas, and they are probably starving to death. There's been no rain, there's a killer drought, and peasants, who make up 80% of the population here, have been unable to grow their crops. They have no money, and they have very little food. I'd never been to Mozambique before, and nothing prepared me for what we saw here. And the worst of this tragedy is yet to come. It seemed at first a brutal image from another age. People in the central Mozambique village of Chibavava were eating scrubland grass. It has no nutritional value, but that consideration is now a luxury. It was, they told us, a desperate act to survive the war and the drought, to stave off hunger, engulfing their province and destroying their lives. The grass is boiled and salted.
It was several days ago that she ate maize.
And how does she feel about having to eat grass with her family here? Before she could answer, her husband spoke for the family.
At least it's something to eat. We're just trying to get some food to eat, and this is something to eat, so at least we can stay alive.
Not that staying alive is easy. People have abandoned their farms. The winter rains never came. Their crops were burnt dry by the sun. The ground is unyielding and unproductive. One alternative to a diet of scrubland grass is a kind of root, gouged out from dried up riverbeds. The root is poisonous if it's not properly cooked. It makes the very act of eating dangerous. There was an all-pervading sense of despair about this village, of twisted and broken lives being slowly extinguished by squalor and disease. There's cholera, malaria, dysentery, and most common of all, malnutrition among the young and the old. A single image of a mother able no longer to feed her child encapsulates the travail of an entire nation. This is a refugee camp for people escaping the war and the drought. The nurse showed me a 2-year-old suffering from malnutrition and conjunctivitis. Jao Mabai's family had been killed by anti-government guerrillas. He's also a refugee from the drought. He told me we were forced to live in the bush like animals. Shibete Shimongo sits on his own under a tree. He has no family left and has survived on grass for a fortnight. He's 70 and sits waiting to die. The drought comes against a background of war. For 17 years, the Mozambican army have been fighting Renamo anti-government guerrillas. These men are not regularly paid and are poorly equipped. Attempts to end the fighting have so far failed. This convoy carrying maize was attacked a month ago. Food trucks can be attacked by either side. The war goes on. And these are its victims, caught in the crossfire. This young girl lost the power of speech after she was attacked allegedly by anti-government forces. This woman had reached the hospital only 2 days before. She was suffering from gunshot wounds. Although already overcrowded with victims of the war, the hospital is now also trying to cope with an influx of the malnourished. The people of Mozambique know all the declensions of human misery. This is a graphic illustration, the Limpopo River bone dry, reduced to a crossing for animals. I'd heard a lot about the Limpopo going dry before coming here, but to actually stand in the middle of this riverbed is an extraordinary experience. It's shocking, and it's painful, especially when one considers what this once mighty river meant to the people who lived around here. The only water that's left is dirty, assiduously brought to the surface and skimmed for impurities. The once mighty lady now yields her treasures grudgingly. Every day, thousands of refugees flock into Mozambique's capital, Maputo, to escape the war and the drought. There's food in abundance here for the few who can afford it, but it's difficult to get that food out into the country. There's a chronic shortage of transport. The roads are bad, and there are widespread allegations of bureaucratic lethargy and corruption. The great sadness for the children of this city, who scavenge for food in the rubbish tips, or for those who are starving in the country, is that Mozambique's latest crisis has only just begun.
Trevor, is there any evidence at all to suggest that things are going to get better?
Well, Alastair, there's no evidence at the moment. Things look pretty bad. The problem is that the rains haven't come, and people now have to wait till December to see if, under normal conditions, the rains do come then. But the problem is that between now and then, people have no crops, they have no food, they have no money. So it's a pretty desperate situation all around.
And the aid which could help simply isn't getting through.
Well, aid has been a problem. It isn't getting through. Incidentally, tonight we heard that the government have apparently changed their minds on the question of aid. Aid coming into this country has always been taxed, and that has discouraged a lot of potential donors. But now the government are rethinking that policy, and so maybe aid may come in greater quantities. The government have always said, though, that they want donors to share with them a view that the government has about the redevelopment of this country. So I feel that aid coming into Mozambique will always be controlled, but perhaps it will be controlled less from now on. The government seems to have caught on to the fact that the situation is extremely desperate.
Trevor, thank you very much indeed. And Trevor will bring the second of those special reports from South Africa tomorrow, and the third from Zimbabwe on Friday.
From a continent struggling with famine to one wrestling ironically with the problems of too much food, the European community is tonight at last close to agreeing on the first ever reform of the notorious Common Agricultural Policy. The plan being completed in Brussels would mean an end to stockpiled food mountains, cuts in price subsidies to farmers, a 30% cut in cereal subsidies, and 15% of Europe's farmland, an area equivalent to the whole of Ireland, to be left fallow and unproductive.
After 18 months of negotiations, EC agriculture ministers, including Britain's John Gummer, appear to be on the verge of a breakthrough over the Common Agricultural Policy. The Agriculture Commissioner, Ray McSharry, said he believed a deal was now possible.
Well, I think that everybody is anxious to make the final effort to bring these talks to conclusion. They're going on quite some time now. I would put it like this, that we're on the last lap, but we still have some obstacles on that lap.
The bargaining is expected to continue into the early hours of tomorrow morning, but the outlines of a deal have been agreed. It would mean an end to the massive grain surpluses, which this year are expected to reach 26 million tonnes. Instead of artificially supporting prices, farmers will be compensated directly through income support. To stop overproduction, 15% of the land within the EC will be laid fallow each year. The government says it's a good deal for British farmers.
They have moved considerably towards the United Kingdom's position. Much of the discriminatory matter has been taken out, and there is still some way to go, but there is some indication that they're going to move in that direction. So I have real hopes of getting a solution.
For 30 years, the Common Agricultural Policy has been the most controversial aspect of the European Community's work. Tonight, at last, it looks as if a fundamental reform of that policy is now in sight. Libby Wiener, News at 10, Brussels.
King Fahd of Saudi Arabia gave £150,000 today to make sure that Laura Davis, aged 4, can go to the United States for her liver and bowel transplant if her parents decide to send her there. Addenbrooke's hospital near Cambridge has offered to do the operation free, but it's never been done in this country. Wherever she goes, Laura, who's from Eccles in Greater Manchester, will have to wait for a donor.
Today, Laura was well enough to play outside, but her condition is steadily deteriorating. King Fahd's dramatic intervention came through the Saudi ambassador to London, who phoned the Laura Davis appeal in Manchester.
He was representing the King of Saudi Arabia, and how much money had we got in the appeal up to now? I told him, and then he said, how much more do you need? I said 150,000, and he just said, right, you've got it.
And soon after that, Laura had the King's cheque.
Just overwhelmed by what people are doing, and obviously the man that's giving him the cheque, thank you for giving Laura that choice and a chance of survival.
If Laura is well enough to go to Pittsburgh, she'll have to join a waiting list for a donor. But the surgeon who'd operate on Laura is tonight advising her to have the operation here.
My own personal conviction is that she would be better off to have this done in England because she wouldn't be competing with other children for donors.
Laura's parents will decide on Friday whether she should have the operation here or in the United States. They face an agonizing dilemma, and time is running out.
American Roger Coleman, convicted of rape and murder 10 years ago, is due to go to the electric chair tonight. Like all convicted killers in the United States, he's presented appeal after appeal in the courts. But unlike the others, Coleman has also protested his innocence on live TV. A report in Part 2. Plus, Clark tells police every aspect of the job will help with his inquiries. And England's sweet revenge against the World Cup champions, Pakistan. That's in a couple of minutes.
Tell me, how can I save money on public telephone calls? Well, first purchase a Mercurycard like this. Thank you. You can phone anyone, anywhere. And with a Mercurycard phone, you're only charged for the time you are on the phone. The call will not be rounded up to the nearest 10 pence. Goodbye. My call cost 11 pence, so I was charged... 11 pence? Yes. Yes. Splendid.
Mercurycards are available from W.H. Smith, Martin Newsagents, post offices and most high street retailers.
Yes.
For more information on Mercury, phone Mercury Free Call.
Empty 1 tin of plum tomatoes from Sainsbury's into a pan. Add 2 tablespoons of Sainsbury's olive oil. Season and break down the tomatoes with a spoon. Then add 1 fresh mozzarella cheese from Sainsbury's, diced into small pieces. Now sprinkle on some grated Parmesan. Heat until the sauce just bubbles. Add a handful of chopped basil and remove from heat. Meanwhile, cook some Sainsbury's penny in salted water. After a few minutes, before it gets too soft, drain and place in a baking dish. Pour on the sauce and mix thoroughly. Add some more parmesan. Then place in a moderate oven for about 10 minutes. Remove and eat while piping hot. Delicious.
Sainsbury's, everyone's favourite ingredient.
From Whirlpool comes the Aqualine washing machine. It saves time, water and energy. Aqualine from Whirlpool brings quality to life.
This light Philadelphia you bought is so delicious. Thank you. I can't stop eating it. Yes, I'm rather partial to it myself. Oh, I'm afraid I want some too.
The car in front has a unique lean burn engine for performance with economy. Catalytic converters for cleaner exhaust emission from a fuel-injected multi-valve engine. The lines of its sculptured bodywork are seamless. Its interior is more spacious and refined. Solid doors with side impact beams enclose you in a haven of high tensile steel. And it has the added security of a car alarm and a 3-year, 60,000-mile warranty. The car in front is a Toyota, the new Carina E.
A prisoner due to die on America's death row in just a few hours' time was given a last-minute chance of reprieve. He was allowed to take a lie detector test and failed. Roger Coleman faces the electric chair in Virginia for the rape and murder of his sister-in-law. In daily appearances on chat shows from his prison cell, he has proclaimed his innocence.
Roger Coleman is fighting for his life live on American television.
I had no reason to want to hurt Wanda. I had no reason to want to rape her.
Our guest is Roger Keith Coleman. He is scheduled to die next Wednesday night in the electric chair in Virginia. He's at the death house now, and we'll be back.
On talk show after talk show, in a bizarre televised death row drama, Coleman has been arguing his innocence.
I'm innocent. I do not want to be executed for a crime I did not commit.
Coleman was convicted 10 years ago of the murder of his 19-year-old sister-in-law, but he says new evidence would clear him. Last week, Time magazine put Coleman on its cover, but it is on primetime television that his case has been emotionally paraded.
First of all, I should let you say hello to your mom.
Hi, Mom.
Hi, Roger. I love you.
Love you too.
I miss you. I want you to come home.
I know. Maybe I'll die, but I hope that my death will not be in vain and that eventually my innocence will be proven and that it will serve to show others in America how wrong the death penalty is. So maybe another man will not die who's innocent. Maybe his family and his loved ones will be spared that.
Coleman's supporters and detractors have all aired their views of him.
And what we have here is a shrewd, convicted murderer who is trying to snooker the public.
He is a warm, caring, generous person, and he has taught me what it is to love.
Tonight, as the television trucks gathered outside the Virginia prison, Coleman was granted but failed a lie detector test. Time for Roger Coleman seems to be running out. Kevin Dunn, News at 10, Washington.
Here, a government inquiry which could radically change the shape of Britain's police force was announced today by the Home Secretary, Kenneth Clarke. He told a Police Federation conference in Scarborough that every aspect of the career and pay structure of the force were under review. Among his proposals, performance-related pay and compulsory redundancy for officers who are inefficient.
The new Home Secretary intends to create a new-look police force. The inquiry he announced will look at the structure of that force, the jobs the police do, and crucially, their pay. In a year's time, he wants answers to these questions.
Is what we're doing the best way to do it in the future?
Are we always rewarding the right people in the service fairly? Is a blanket percentage increase in pay to every rank and every officer, irrespective of type of work or competence, really the best way of reimbursing the police for the huge spectrum of work that they do?
Mr. Clark is not yet talking of cutting anyone's pay, but he is talking of giving the money to those who perform best.
I think a look at the way in which the pay is settled, a look at the way in which it's distributed, making sure that fair rewards go to people who are delivering good quality services.
Police spokesmen say they're happy to join the inquiry, but they're certainly not happy to link pay to performance.
It must be our duty, on the behalf of the people we represent, to kill the idea of performance-related pay. We don't think it can work within the police service, and we will hope to persuade the inquiry of that.
The Federation presented Ken Clark with a cuddly toy before he left, in recognition of his recent remark that he's no Rottweiler, more a lovable pooch. But this is a pooch which may prove to have sharp teeth. So even though on the surface police remain perfectly relaxed about this coming inquiry, privately leaders admit that they're going to have to fight to keep their pay deal. A deal which over the last 10 years has guaranteed pay rises for all policemen, and a deal which may end next year. Peter Allen, News at 10, Scarborough.
Mrs. Thatcher, in a newspaper article, has again intervened in the debate on Europe, saying the Maastricht Treaty would mean passing colossal powers to bureaucrats in Brussels. John Major told the Commons he wasn't signing up for a centralised federal Europe. MPs vote on the treaty tomorrow night. It's thought about 25 Tories could rebel. They're against any move towards a single European currency, though Mr. Major said that will be decided by the Commons. They're against any more power for the European Parliament and any more power for the European Court.
Arriving MPs had a chance to see some of the more exuberant members of the European community in action, Italian and Spanish football supporters in town for tonight's European Cup. Inside the chamber, John Major, his "I've won an election" confidence very clear, set out in a well-written and carefully delivered speech to win over Tory rebels.
What at Maastricht we kept out of the treaty is as important as what in the event went into the treaty. There is no social chapter. There is no social chapter. No weakening of our power of national decision-taking in foreign policy. No word federal, and no commitment to a federal, by which I mean a centralising Europe.
But as the Prime Minister spoke, details began circulating of Mrs. Thatcher's latest outburst. A direct challenge to Mr. Major's no federalism line in tomorrow's European. Maastricht, she says, means enormous transfers of powers from national governments to a centralised bureaucracy. A point taken up in the House by arch-Tory Eurosceptic Bill Cash.
There is a gravitational pull which exists in this treaty and would be endorsed by this bill, which would take us, I would say, drag us into a federal Europe. If you care to use the expression a unitary state, I don't really mind.
The Liberal Democrats, though, reckon that Maastricht and the present bill doesn't go far enough. However,
we will vote in favour of it because we believe that the Maastricht Treaty is a step forward which must be taken.
But Labour will abstain because Mr. Kinnock said the government had opted out from what would have been the best bit, decent conditions for British workers.
And it's high time that the government faced up to that and stopped hoping that if they can make Britain into the labour market bargain basement of Europe, they can get some kind of edge over our competitors.
The debate will go on late tonight and will continue all day tomorrow. The government facing not defeat, only the sound and fury of those who never really liked Europe anyway. Michael Brunson, News at 10, Westminster.
Any consumer-led economic recovery seems, from figures today, to have been postponed. According to the Central Statistical Office, retail sales in April rose by only 0.8%, not enough even to wipe out the 1% fall in March.
Cricket. England had an easy win over the world champions Pakistan in the first of the Texaco Trophy one-day matches at Lord's. England hit 278 for 6 in their 55 overs, Robin Smith 85, Alan Lamb 60. Pakistan were all out for 199.
From the start, this was a different game to the World Cup final. Alex Stewart's 50 was the platform for a huge England total. Wasim apart, Pakistan's bowling was less than world-class. Some delicate strokes from Robin Smith put him on the road to a top score of 85. and the Man of the Match award. Then Alan Lamb weighed in with 60 before Naved bowled and Javed caught him in full flight. With more than 5 and over on the board, the outlook was bright for England, even more so when Ramees capitulated tamely to Pringle in Pakistan's second over. Ian Botham had been relatively quiet with the bat, but with the ball he was back to his old self. Salim caught behind, then Botham accounting for Inzamam all by himself. Pakistan's faint hopes of victory went as Wasim was caught by Stewart on 34. It was all over with Pakistan 79 short. Their game needing improvement all round to give them any hope in the Test series.
Soccer, the European Cup final at Wembley tonight went to extra time. The final result, Barcelona 1, Sampdoria of Italy 0. One other result in the World Cup qualifiers Group 4, Romania 5, Wales 1.
The main news again. British Rail has been blamed for poor maintenance, allowing some carriage doors to fly open at speed. And in Thailand, the Prime Minister has promised moves towards democracy and freedom for many prisoners.
And that's news at 10 from John and from me. A very good night to you.